Okay, it's RDNA rumor roundup time. It's no surprise or no secret that AMD is hosting an event in Las Vegas at the beginning of November, and I give you guys basically 3 guesses, but you only need 1, as to what it's gonna be about. NZXT Canvas monitors feature more of what gamers want. The Canvas 1440p QHD offers a 165Hz refresh rate for the perfect balance between performance and resolution, while the 1080p Full HD Canvas delivers 240Hz for a competitive edge. Both versions feature AMD FreeSync Premium, 1 millisecond response time, and OSD settings via CAM, allowing for specific settings between games. To see the complete list of Canvas monitors and monitor mounts from NZXT, follow the link in the description below. So some fun, exciting things to kind of talk about here. It's important to note also too, this is rumors. At least at the time of making this video, we have not been briefed on anything. So everything I'm talking about is just kind of like what's sort of making the rounds. And the closer we get to these launches, the more accurate they tend to be. So let's go ahead and start off with the fact that we know it's RDNA 3. We know that it's 7000 series is what they're gonna call it. And the initial rumor is, let's just talk about performance, because that's what everyone cares about, right? Then we'll talk about efficiency, we'll talk about core design, availability, potential pricing, all that sort of stuff. So 2 times faster in rasterization performance. That doesn't seem all that surprising if we look at the history of the performance of RDNA. So what we did was we've been testing these graphics cards since they first launched, right? All the way back to the 5700 XT. So what we did was we took a 5700 XT. Remember, there was no 5800 or 5900. It was 5700 XT, their first, when they kind of got away from Vega and all that and Radeon 7, they went back to a more traditional design and they launched with more mid-range cards, kind of like Intel launched their mid-range cards first. And so we compared the 5700 XT, which was the highest RDNA 1 offering, compared to a 6950 XT, which is their latest and greatest, biggest die they've made, to date. And we took that 2X claim to see how that holds up. If you look at the 5700 XT, it's approximately 40% of the performance of a 6950 XT. If we take that 6950 XT performance figure and double it, and this is just TimeSpy, by the way, which scales very well to core design. It doesn't mean that the scaling in games will be the same. There's too many other factors there in terms of like what type of shadow technology are they using, what type of anti-aliasing are they using, is there any sort of upscaling? Are they taking any leverage of any of the RT cores or tensor cores on NVIDIA, or, there's too much other stuff happening. But TimeSpy Extreme is just a rasterization DX12 test that does nothing but just scale perfectly with core speed. So that's why we use that, but it doesn't tell the whole story, keep that in mind. But 2X performance would put us at right around 21,130, which puts us about 1,500 or so points ahead, about 1,600 points ahead of the current 4090, available by the FE card, which is a custom card, by the way, in rasterization performance. Now the claim is 2X rasterization, and I wanted to know, does that even seem realistic or feasible? Well, yes, because we've gotten a minimum of 2X from 5000 series to 6000 series, and now 6000 series top dog to 7000 series, based on that potential number and where 30 series is, or excuse me, the 4090 is, and the uplift we saw 4090 versus 3090, it seems very realistic that in rasterization performance, AMD might actually edge out NVIDIA. Remember, to see where we're going, we have to look at where we've been, right? It's just the way trends work. So that's exciting to see. Something else worth talking about here is the fact that AMD is very, very aware of the uplift in power necessary for Ada Lovelace's performance figures to be what they are. In fact, AMD is also very aware of the amount of power draw that's taking place through the 12-volt high power connector, and they made an official statement since we did our video about the melted cable, saying that they will not be using that plug, which is actually great news because early rumors said that they were going to be using that plug. Maybe they were planning on it, maybe because of ATX 3.0 forward compatibility, which, by the way, those power supplies will have standard power cables as well as the 16 pin. People like to count the 4-pin sideband as pins, but anyway, I digress. Maybe this is one of those things where the benefit of not going first is you get to kind of see what the competition struggles with, and then you can pivot and make some changes and look better at the end of the day because of the fact that you're not gonna make the same mistakes that your competition is because you're letting them make them. So we now know that AMD has officially stated they will not be using the new 12/16 pin connector at all, which is good news. Although it may not have mattered, because if we look at efficiency, if we look at this chart that was put out here in terms of specs and such, and these are preliminary specs, so all of these are subject to change, but we are looking at a 12,288 core design on a chiplet design, by the way. So the architecture part of this is going to be very similar to how they developed Ryzen, where it's scalable based on chiplets. And there is going to be an Infinity fabric on the GPU as well, and it's going to operate very similarly to how their Ryzen architecture does, only very, very fast versus Ryzen in terms of just its graphics performance. So moving from a 6950 XT, or 6900 XT, or the XTX, whatever you want to call it, went from 5120 cores to 12,288. So now seeing that 2x performance and rasterization uplift seems very reasonable because there's more than 2x as many cores. So, but now let's talk about power efficiency, because that is where a lot of people are going to be showing a lot of concern. Preliminarily, it shows 350 watts. That is 100 watts below the spec of an RTX 4090. That's 100 watts lower than the lifted spec of a 3090 Ti. Remember, 3090 Ti landed anywhere between 400 to 450 watts, depending if you move power sliders and such. But the 3090 Ti was also fairly locked down versus power sliders compared to a 3090 and a 3080 and such. They're also claiming 2 times performance in ray tracing, which by the way puts it a little bit, about 20% ahead of an Ampere architecture RT core, or the second gen RT cores found in Ampere, like 3090, 3090 Ti and all that. But not as fast as Ada Lovelace if we just use that math. So you got to ask yourself how much you care about ray tracing performance to say, hey, I want a 7000 series card. If you are still in the bandwagon of saying, I don't care about ray tracing performance, which is kind of getting harder to say these days because so many titles are now utilizing the RT cores and ray tracing in some capacity within the game's engine, this looks amazing. Because they promised, or at least they're touting, a 50% performance per watt uplift. So that means for the same watt, you'd get 50% more performance out of that same power draw. A lot of people sometimes misread that to say it's 50% more efficient, which technically you could say yes, but that doesn't mean they didn't up the wattage, which if we can see right here, if this is true, they upped it by 20 watts total board power, which is kind of like negligible at this point, given the expansion of the card specs itself. Because we also were seeing from 16 gigabytes up to 24 gigabytes on the 7900 XT. Which is kind of nice, because that's one of the things people that were doing any sort of heavy intensive graphics memory workload, whether you're using the graphics card to do any sort of 3D rendering or Blender type work, higher VRAM is king when it comes to that sort of workload. If you're even using your card to do any sort of like AI training and stuff, VRAM is king. Memory speed is showing a preliminary 20 gigabytes per second. Whereas the 6900 XT was 16 to 18 gigabytes per second, or gigabits per second. So GDDR6, the usual stuff. In terms of die size, it's actually smaller. The die itself is smaller compared to 6900 XT, but remember the 6900 XT has a single die at 520 millimeters squared. The chiplets found on 7000 series are looking to be about 308 millimeters per squared. However, that's per chiplet. And it's 533 millimeters squared with MCDs. So it depends on the sizing. And remember, the way that they're gonna scale up these graphics cards, if they do it the same way as Ryzen, is gonna be how many of those MCDs are actually gonna be in there. So what we're seeing here is the design on 7000 series, or Navi 31 for the 7900 XT being apparently 1 GCD plus 6 MCDs. So again, scalable, which is kind of nice to see. But my concern there, in terms of early adopter, is gonna be, how are games gonna leverage this new architecture design? I can promise you right now, when the card launches, or at least when we are in our early testing phase, and as content creators, I can guarantee you AMD's dealing with this right now. They probably got a lot of basic boards in the hands of game developers and studios to say, here's how our architecture works, so you can start kind of planning for it. There's going to be day one bugs. There's gonna be games that maybe won't launch. There's gonna be games that might crash. There's gonna be games that probably will have severe instability or fluctuations or issues, because it's going to take time for this completely different core design that we've never seen before become fully adopted. So that's the downside if you're gonna move into adopting AMD's RDNA 3 tech on day one. It will work itself out, just like it did with Ryzen. But be aware, when you make a major design change like this, it's gonna take time. Now, one of the ways that they're achieving this level of power efficiency, and again, this is via AMD, and you can find this quote also on WCCF Tech's website. We'll put a link down below. He says, looking ahead, we're continuing our push for more efficient gaming with AMD RDNA 3 architecture. It's the first graphics architecture to leverage 5nm process and the chiplet packaging design, and it's the 50% better performance per watt than RDNA 2. It's top of the line gaming performance and a cool, quiet energy efficiency design. It says, contributing to this energy conscious design, RDNA 3 redefines the AMD RDNA 2 adaptive power management technology to set workload specific operating points, ensuring each component of the GPU uses only the power it requires for optimal performance. The new architecture also includes the new generation of AMD Infinity Cache, projected to offer an even higher density, lower power caches to reduce the power needs of graphics memory, helping to cement AMD RDNA 3 and Radeon graphics as the true leaders in efficiency. It's funny because one of the things I notice when I'm overclocking 4090 is if I'm monitoring power, upping the core clock makes the power go up, but if I up the memory clock, it shoots up really high. It sounds like this is one of the ways that they're able to achieve that. Basically what they say here is kind of eye-opening. This is why there has to be some power lift. I know a lot of people are like, why does the power have to go up at all? Why did NVIDIA go up as high as it did? Well, he says it's really the fundamentals of physics that are driving this. And this is Nafziger. He says, the demand for gaming and compute performance is, if anything, just accelerating. And at the same time, the underlying process technology is slowing down pretty dramatically. And the improvement rate. So power levels are just going to keep going up. And now we've got a multi-year roadmap of very significant efficiency improvements to offset that curve. But the trend is there. He's saying the architecture is not moving as fast as the demand for performance is. Therefore, by default, you need more power to get more performance out of it. So it's kind of like the Moore's Law thing. A lot of people say Moore's Law is dead. He says, performance is king, but even if our designs are more power efficient, that doesn't mean you don't push the power levels up if the competition is doing the same thing. It's just that they're gonna have to push them a lot higher than we will. So not only were they going after NVIDIA specifically regarding performance, because you have to match the performance, you have to try at least, but if they're able to even get anywhere close or match the performance of 40 series at 350 watts, then AMD absolutely, when they sat right here in this studio and told us back in 2019 that RDNA will be aging like fine wine just as Ryzen did, we have a lot to look forward to. The only negative versus NVIDIA that I can come up with here is that the RT performance, if that truly matters to you, is not going to match 4090's capability, because 4090 saw a 2x uplift over 30 series on RT performance. And we verified that, and so did everyone else. That seemed like such an astronomical uplift, but it's true. 2x RT performance over RDNA 2 only puts it a little ahead of 30 series. However, 30 series RT performance is not bad. It's just, it really comes down to price at this point. Because if this graphics card, let's say the 7900 XT ends up costing $1,000. It's still a very expensive graphics card, but $600 cheaper than a 4090 if possible. I'm concerned about this chiplet design, might be expensive to produce. The price is what's gonna matter now at this point to get a lot of people adopting. But the positives here, not using the stupid 12-volt power connector, scalable, makes it easy, I think, for them to bust out designs and get them out sooner without having to actually have a die cut. It's just how many of those GCDs and MCDs are on the substrate. Faster memory, more of it. Uplift of 2x performance in rasterization and 2x performance in RT. And if you can make it cheaper, it's already more efficient. This is awesome. Anyway, guys, that's the rumor roundup. We're gonna be in Vegas next week. I always say keep your ear to the ground because we're ready. Hopefully you are too. All right, guys, thanks for watching. Sound off down below if 7000 series is even on your radar. I think there's a lot of people right now that are just absolutely rooting for AMD for a multitude of reasons. All right, guys, thanks for watching. And as always, we'll see you in the next one.